Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. We'll give everyone just one more minute to join and then we'll get started. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Tiara Rahman and I'm the Director of Professional Development for BOMA, New York. If you have any questions throughout today, any technical difficulties, feel free to reach out to me directly in the chat. We'll be holding questions until the end of the presentation. However, you can drop them in the questions box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen at any point during today's presentation. And with that, I'll hand it over to our speaker for the day, Brian Moran.
Perfect. Appreciate it, Tiara. Yes, I really quickly just want to echo you thanking everybody for jumping in. I know it's always busy midweek, but really appreciate everybody taking some time to walk through the Commercial Waste Zones program. So if you potentially missed the description for this session and found your way here, I am super excited to be the first to let you know that that will be our topic for the next 60 minutes. We'll talk through all things commercial waste zones and how businesses can start to get ready, some of the compliance requirements, and hopefully you can ask some questions along the way. But I will quickly introduce myself. My name is Brian Moran. I am the Director of Contract Compliance for Action Environmental Services, which is the New York City division of Interstate Waste Services. My entire job is entirely focused on understanding and studying the rules, the regulations, and the overall evolution of the Commercial Waste Zones program. So I support our entire New York City market in learning everything that we have to do as a respective awardee, and then helping them to equip our customers with understanding, knowledge, and tools to be able to comply with all of the rules and requirements for this program's implementation. And admittedly, that's the entire purpose for today. So I really appreciate, again, Tiara, you and BOMA allowing us the chance to come in and speak on this program, because we do want to educate our customers and potential businesses and just the New York City community in general about what this program is, what it means for the 5 boroughs, what it means for awardees as the folks who are, as the companies that will be collecting waste and recycling across the 5 boroughs, and then more specifically, what it means for customers. It has changed, but there are plenty of resources out there to learn what customers have to do to comply with these rules and regulations, and then what we can do to prepare in advance. So that's how today will be structured. I will give a little bit of an overview on what this program is, the history of how we've started all the way back in 2019 to where we've gotten today. Then we will dive directly into the compliance requirements and specifically how businesses can contract with authorized awardees. And we'll go a little bit more deep into the businesses and property management side of how those specific customers can structure their contracts to maintain compliance with DSNY's implementation. From there, we will go a little bit more directly into what's next. So there is a transition period coming up pretty soon for Bronx East and Bronx West. And we can start preparing now, both on a hauler side and on a customer side. So we'll walk through what those things are that we can do to prepare. And then towards the end, I want to answer as many questions as I can. So TR mentioned it, but I believe that there's a questions box that you can list out all of your questions. And during that session, we'll walk through as many as we can. But at the root of it, for any questions that we don't get to, we'll make sure to follow up and we'll get you the information that you need. All right, cool. So we'll dive straight in. I'm going to rewind all the way back to 2019 when the New York City Council passed Local Law 199. This law effectively revolutionizes how waste and recycling is collected across the 5 boroughs for commercial businesses. Because the law divides New York City into 20 unique zones, and in each one of those zones, only 3 authorized awardees are permitted to collect commercial waste and recycling. There are then 5 awardees who citywide are permitted to collect containerized waste, which is any waste or recycling that is contained in a 10 cubic yard container or larger. This is a drastic change from how the industry and the city has operated historically. And just to give you some context behind that, so when this law was passed and when awards were announced to the respective companies that would continue providing service to businesses across the city, there were 95 companies that commercial businesses could choose service from. So that means that there were 95 options, just like action carding, that businesses could enter into either written, verbal, handshake agreements with to have their garbage and recycling collected. By the time that this program is fully implemented, we will be going from a little bit over 90 companies down to 18. So that is drastic market consolidation. It's a huge update to this working model within the city. And admittedly, it's a fair question to ask why. So why is the city driving this forward? What are they looking to accomplish? And there are a number of program goals that they're looking to drive from this program. And I'll talk about a few of them, some of the top ones being reducing vehicle miles traveled. So as you can imagine, with 95 companies operating across the city, that is a lot of trucks. And if you consider one block in the city, you may have business 1 through 20 and all of the neighboring businesses 1, 2, 3, 4, they may be serviced by different haulers, which would all require 4 different trucks, 5 different trucks to go down the same block to collect the waste and recycling. So the city is looking to increase routing efficiency and reduce the number of trucks that it actually takes to collect waste in certain regions. And by doing that, by taking trucks off the road, by consolidating routes, they are going to effectively be alleviating traffic, which is great within New York City, but then also reducing vehicle emissions. So driving forward a number of environmental benefits that they're looking to garner from this program. The second goal that they are driving forward is improving levels of safety across the city and protecting communities. So as you can imagine, with a heavily industrial industry that requires super heavy equipment, safety has to be every company's first priority. And across the city, now through this program, there are standard safety requirements that every single awardee will have to follow, including safety training, having emergency action plans. There's levels of governance that the city now has to track to make sure that awardees are, one, operating in a safe manner, and two, considering the community impact that they have as parts of as integral parts of the city. So those are one and two: reducing vehicle miles traveled. Number two, improving safety across the city. And then the third goal that I'll talk about, which is where we'll spend the majority of this session, is heightening levels of transparency within the relationships between customers and respective haulers. So there are a number of customer service rules when it comes to how haulers communicate and maintain relationships with customers across the city. And one of the biggest changes that is driven through this program is that now, as soon as a zone is live, every single commercial business across the 5 boroughs is obligated by rule to enter into a written service agreement with one of the respective awardees within their zone. So that is a big change in itself. Regardless of whether a customer or a business is serviced by an awardee who will continue servicing that zone, or a company that will no longer be servicing that zone, they will always have to enter into a new CWZ-specific service agreement as soon as a transition period starts. And I'll go into more detail about what a transition period is, some of the responsibilities for awardees and customers alike while zones start to transition. But at the root of it, that is a huge change when it comes to the city. And overall, there are resources out there, and any awardee will be able to walk any customer through what has to be included within those written service agreements, how they can be structured out. But in terms of a program overview, that is what the city is looking to accomplish. So there are more program goals, but to continue outlining what the city will look like from an options standpoint. So we're going from 95 companies down to this map right here. So within each of these respective zones, there are 3 curbside awardees that can provide a service to collect commercial waste and recycling. And then the box that is towards the bottom that says citywide containerized awardees, those awardees are permitted to collect containerized or 10 plus cubic yard material across the entirety of the city. So continuing on, where are we today with this implementation? We'll go through transition periods and things like that. But as of 2019, there has been progress to date. And where we are today is that we currently have one of the 20 zones fully implemented. So Queens Central transitioned at the back half of 24, at the back quarter of 24. And as of January 3rd, 2025, that zone is officially live. So to talk about some of the, feedback from Queens Central and what DSNY has published during City Council hearings is that there have not been any customer complaints related to missed pickups and things like that that are specific to the CWZ program within Queens Central. Every single commercial business has been entered into a service agreement with an awardee at this point. And the third piece of information they disclosed is that there are no longer any non-authorized awardee companies providing service to customers within that zone. The next increment of this zone rollout, this program rollout, will be within Bronx East and Bronx West. So towards the end of this year, on October 1st, that is when those 2 zones transition periods will officially launch. By November 30th is when every single commercial business will have to enter into a written service agreement with one of the 3 awardees. And just to go into some detail that I'll touch on a little bit later as well, but if any commercial business does not elect to enter into a service agreement with one of the authorized awardees, the Department of Sanitation actually has the authority to step in and assign those respective businesses into written service agreements on that business's behalf. So when they do that, the business will be entered into a written service agreement at the maximum permissible rates at the minimum levels of service. So it is highly, highly, highly encouraged that customers take action sooner rather than later and maintain their autonomy in negotiating their rates of service and the levels of service that work for their respective business. So during a transition period, awardees will reach out to customers. They will get them any information that they need regarding the service offerings and what they're able to provide. However, customers do have the choice to select one of those three awardees. And by November 30th, if they have not selected one of those three awardees, that's when the DSNY will step in and the customer will be assigned to one of the three awardees. What we know at this point in terms of program rollout, those are the dates that we've been provided, and then we've also received the sequence in terms of the other zones that will also be rolled out. So this is the order that was published by DSNY. This is also on actioncarding.com. It's on the DSNY's website. However, the other piece of information that we do know is that the full program implementation will be complete by the end of 2027. So the entire city will be transitioned to a CWZ model by 2027. So it's going to be a very busy 2 years. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of things we can do now to start to prepare. But anytime that the DSNY announces any further information regarding zone rollout timelines, that will be updated on our website, actioncarding.com, as well as the DSNY's website. But in terms of communication of information, that is a very big priority for Action. The more information that our customers have at their disposal, the easier it'll be come time that they have to start to elect one of the three awardees, and it'll be less of a jolt, admittedly. So we want to try to get as much of the information out now, even if we don't have the solidified dates for all of the zones that are going to be going live. Okay, so that is program overview, and from a regulatory side, where we stand. Next, and what we'll spend some time going through is the compliance requirements. So hopefully this answers a number of your questions on how we will structure out these written service agreements and what to consider when working with a sales rep or account manager from a respective awardee. But we'll dive straight in. So the first question here is, what is a zone transition period or a launch period? And I touched on this a little bit, but there are 3 milestones to consider when a zone is transitioning to CWZ, a live commercial waste zone. And it's an implementation start date, which is officially the first date in which commercial businesses within that respective zone can enter into written service agreements with an authorized awardee. So commercial businesses are not permitted to enter into CWZ agreements until a zone has started to transition. However, as soon as that implementation start date hits, that's when businesses within that zone can enter into those agreements. Then the second milestone is going to be the final implementation date, which, for example, within the Bronx will be November 30th. That is the date by which a commercial business has to enter into an agreement with a written service agreement with one of the respective authorized awardees. The third milestone is the go live date, and that is the official first day in which only authorized awardees are permitted to service customers within a respective zone. So that's what a transition period is, but if you boil it down, that's when customers and respective commercial businesses have to start to make some decisions and enter into written service agreements. On a daily basis during a transition period, all awardees are required to submit into the Department of Sanitation a list of the respective businesses that have entered into agreements. That is how the department is monitoring to make sure that all commercial businesses have entered into an agreement, and they're consolidating and crafting the list of businesses that will need to be assigned to a respective awardee. Okay, so the next question, and this one it comes up in a good number of conversations, is will the cost of service increase because of this program? And it's important to recognize that the commercial waste zones program inherently does not increase the cost of service. So the structure of pricing when it comes to how authorized haulers are permitted to charge for service is by frequency of collection and then by weight or volume of the waste generated. When it comes to Action and IWS, the rates of service and the total monthly cost per location will not increase due to the CWZ program. Due to the structure of the pricing, rates may look a little bit different. However, the total monthly cost when it comes to Action and IWS, that will remain the same. This is something that as you're negotiating those written service agreements, these are good questions to ask. There is a structure that awardees have to follow when it comes to pricing, and every single awardee also has maximum rates that are published on their websites and also published on the DSNY's website. So every respective awardee has to follow those respective rates. Okay, the next question. So how can you find the zone that your business or businesses lie in? On our website and on the DSNY's website, there is a Find Your Zone tool. You can type in your respective business's address and it will actually just show you exactly which zone that business lies in. Our team has bolstered our respective website with a ton of information regarding CWZ. So I definitely recommend take a look. And if you're unsure of where your business actually lies, type in the address and you'll be able to see exactly which zone your business falls into. Okay, the next question. Are there exceptions to CWZ requirements based on the type of material businesses dispose? So it's important to remember that it does not go based off of the type of service. CWZ requirements are not bound by the type of service that a customer receives. It does, however, go based off of the type of material that the business disposes. So there are a number of material types that are excluded from the CWZ program. They're listed here. They include construction and demolition debris, film material, medical waste, electronic waste, textiles, yard waste, collected by landscapers, waste collected by a one-time, on-call bulk removal service, grease, paper that is collected for the purpose of shredding or deconstruction, or waste that is collected by a micro hauler. Okay, what happens if a business does not want to enter into a new contract? This goes back to what I mentioned before about the assignment process. So if a business does not elect to enter into an agreement on their own accord, then the DSNY does have the authority to step in and they will assign that business to a respective awardee at the maximum permissible rates and the minimum levels of service. What if a customer owns multiple businesses, and what if those businesses operate in different zones? So when it comes to contracting, businesses may enter into one service agreement containing multiple locations or separate service agreements for the individual locations themselves. That said, it is important to note that if those respective businesses do lie within different zones, then the respective awardee needs to be authorized to operate in all of those zones that are included within that written service agreement. And awardees may only sign up businesses on once a transition period has started. So if you have businesses that are in different zones, then for example, if you have businesses within the Bronx and businesses within Manhattan, then come October of this year, awardees will be able to sign up your respective Bronx locations onto a CWZ agreement, but they will not be able to include the Manhattan locations until those respective zones start to transition. Once all of the zones are live, then those respective service agreements can be consolidated into a written service agreement. However, it's just important to recognize that as we transition these zones, we are only able to enter businesses within those respective zones for the respective transition period onto a written service agreement. This one, wherever there are questions, you're welcome to reach out if you have specific use cases, but sales reps and account managers, myself, we would be able to help walk you through any specific scenarios. Okay, Will customers have to pay an early termination fee if service from their current hauler ends due to the CWZ program? So existing service agreements do become legally void and with unenforceable early termination fees on the date that your respective zone goes live. So again, by law, only authorized awardees will be permitted to operate in live commercial waste zones. So by law, any agreements that existed prior to a zone's transitioning will be legally void as soon as those zones are live. So what the DSMY has encouraged is that if there are early termination clauses, work with an awardee during the transition period to set up service to start once the zone is fully live so that you can avoid any early termination fees that you may be bound to. That said, if you terminate service prior to a zone go live, you have to refer to the terms of your existing agreement, and that is what you'll be bound to. Okay, are there incentives offered to customers for recycling? So yes, within the CWZ program, Action is offering a 30% discount for recycling and a 10% discount for organics collection. All right, now the rest of these questions that we'll walk through are actually FAQ that were distributed by the Department of Sanitation. They are also attempting to help haulers, awardees, and customers alike understand more. So this information is coming directly from DSMY. All right, what is the role of brokers under the CWZ program? Written service agreements must only be between a carder and a customer. Brokers cannot be a party to the written service agreement. If a broker provides an invoice to a customer, the broker services must be on a separate invoice, and the broker agreement must be a separate document. So for anyone who currently works with a broker, this is an adjustment to the respective relationship that you have, because at this point now, all awardees will have to contract with a customer directly. That does not mean that brokers have to cease operations or cease relationships with their respective customers. It's just if they have a relationship with the customer, it has to be documented on a separate service agreement. And then similarly on an invoice, haulers have to send customers directly invoices. However, payments can still be consolidated and sent to brokers. I'm happy to go into more detail for the sake of time with brokers. That is the high level picture of it. However, the next question down, and I'll go back up to who's allowed to sign agreements on behalf of the customers, but can trade waste brokers sign agreements on behalf of customers and or awardees? And the answer is no. So trade waste brokers may not sign agreements on behalf of customers or awardees. Pursuant to CWZ rules, the service agreements must be between the awardee and the customer. Only customers and awardees may be parties to a service agreement. And again, that next piece of that FAQ goes into how brokers can continue having relationships with respective customers. It does need to be on a separate agreement, and if they are charging customers, it has to be on a separate invoice. All right, so who is allowed to sign agreements on behalf of customers? Pursuant to CWZ rules, the written service agreement must be between the awardee and the customer. The signatory must be the business's owner or an authorized representative, such as a high-level employee who has the authority to negotiate and sign agreements on the owner's behalf. Okay, can a property management company or cleaning services company sign an agreement with an awardee? That answer is yes. So a property management company or cleaning services company may be considered a customer and sign agreements with awardees to dispose of building waste. These companies can only be considered a customer if they have a continuous and ongoing relationship with a building where they perform direct services on site and they are responsible party for disposing of the building's waste. Per the broker question, trade waste brokers cannot be customers that sign agreements with awardees. Just to also add, when carders sign up customers, if we do enter into an agreement with a property management company on behalf of a building or businesses, then we do have to keep record of which of those locations we're signing into an agreement with. and they are subject to further requests for information from DSNY. Okay, the next question. So can a customer, including property management or cleaning companies, sign a customer agreement covering multiple buildings with different collection addresses? That answer is yes. They may sign one service agreement containing multiple locations or multiple agreements each containing an individual location. If the multiple locations spread across multiple zones, please note that the awardee must be authorized to service all of the zones within that agreement. Very similar to what I was talking about before with businesses with multiple locations, property management companies and cleaning companies, if they are entering into agreements that cover buildings in different zones or within the same zone, the same rules apply. Can recycling and organics discounts vary across customers based off of individual negotiations? That answer is no. As stipulated within each awardee's CWZ agreement with the Department of Sanitation, recycling and organics discounts must be the same for all of the awardee customers within a zone. Carters may negotiate the garbage rates and additional fees, but recycling and organics rates must be a fixed percentage discount below the refuse rate, so the garbage rate. All right. For agreements signed by a property manager, can agreements and invoices be sent solely to the property manager, or must a copy be sent to each building for each respective service location? The answer from DSNY is that agreements and invoices must be sent to all signatories with signatories of the respective written service agreement. So copies can be sent to the individual service or building locations. However, what we are bound to as awardees is sending the invoices to the signatory on the respective agreement. Okay, what if a customer refuses recycling service? Recycling is required under this law, and all New York City commercial establishments will have to comply. Recycling has to be included on customer service agreements, and customers may not refuse to sign up for recycling service. This is something that DSNY will have oversight into as we are submitting all of our customers into their portal on a daily basis during a transition period. So it's important to consider that if you don't have recycling service now, that is something that when you're speaking with a sales rep or an account manager, it's something to talk through. Okay, are federal, state, city buildings or other authorities exempt from commercial waste zones and these requirements? The answer is no. So federal, state, and city buildings are not exempt from the CWZ program. Any of the specific questions that you may have related to this, whether you've already gone to bid for the respective services or there is a longer procurement cycle, I would recommend reach out early. This is something that the DSNY can support through further information and answering questions. However, to answer the question of whether or not these entities are exempt, the answer is no. Okay, can a property manager, landlord, or customer transport waste between multiple buildings or set-out locations, including for the purpose of consolidating set-out into fewer locations? That answer is no. Only authorized awardees are permitted to transport waste between, in general, only authorized awardees may transport CWZ customers' commercial waste. However, the administrative code does allow for the transport of recyclables for the purpose of collecting or storing such materials for sale or further distribution or the transport of them to a redemption center. Okay, and then are customers allowed to issue RFPs to select a carter? That answer is yes. So customers may issue RFPs if the RFP is issued before the CWZ program is implemented in their zone, then the customers would still be required to comply with the CWZ law upon its implementation. So what that means is that if you run an RFP and you select a respective carter through this process, then the CWZ implementation still does need to account for whether or not that carter has the authorization to provide service within that zone, and you will need to enter into an agreement once the transition period starts. So that is the answer for that. For best practices, RFPs that extend into the timeframe when a CWZ program is in effect should be drafted with the CWZ program and the awardees who service the zone in mind. Okay, so that is the compliance focused section. Again, Tiara is going to send out this deck and some other resources that we've put together just so that you can read through them, digest it a little bit more. I know I'm spewing a lot of information for the sake of having an hour for the session, but please read through it. Wherever you have further questions about your specific business, please reach out and we're happy to go through it. The final piece that I want to go through before we turn it over to Q&A is how businesses can prepare. What can you do now, especially if you are in the Bronx, but more broadly across the city? How can you start to get your businesses, your buildings, how can you get ready for these zones to transition? The first recommendation that I'd have is to determine the zones for your business or businesses and verify the transition timelines if it's already announced or once they are officially announced. Figure out where your zones are because that will determine when you actually have to take action. The second piece, I would work with, you can in advance, you can work with our respective sales team to verify existing service levels, the contracting structure, the method for contract delivery, and the rates. There are a lot of questions and we will be entering into new agreements. So at the root of it, you can ask questions early, and as soon as that transition period goes live, that's when the agreements actually get distributed. So you can ask questions ahead of time and our sales team or any awardee sales team would likely be able to answer those questions for you. Then determining your preferred contract delivery method. So some folks are, and again, this is working with Action and IWS. If digital versus an in-person delivery for that contract is preferred, then knowing that in advance will help our team. There are thousands of commercial businesses within each of these zones. So understanding how to deliver an agreement to a respective business, it helps in advance. So you can start to think about the way that you can receive that contract. The next piece is educate. If you have multiple buildings, if you have multiple tenants or property management companies, admittedly, the goal is to try to educate all commercial businesses of these rules and regulations. And then within the framework, it's figuring out the contracting structure that works for them. So educating your respective constituents, this is what Action and our team is always trying to do ahead of time. Getting them the information early will help with answering questions about contracts and things of that nature. And then the final step really is confirming to make sure that your building understands how and who will execute a service agreement during a transition period. So again, a transition period is when all commercial businesses must enter into a written service agreement with an authorized awardee. Come day one, that implementation start date, it's likely that you will either receive a respective contract or you will hear from an awardee on why it is that you will need to enter into a written service agreement. So confirming that that questions are answered and you understand who and how from within your business itself you can enter into this agreement, that's important. And then during the transition period, it's about entering into that agreement, truly. As soon as you enter into that agreement, then it is the awardee's responsibility to let you know what's coming next when it comes to what to expect from their service, and then also all of the reporting requirements for the Department of Sanitation. And then to make it super, super specific about Bronx businesses, just to make sure that everybody is ready coming up this October, that's when both Bronx East and Bronx West will start to transition. So October 1st, implementation start date. You can start entering into the agreements for CWZ. Come November 30th, that's when it's the final implementation date. You have to enter an agreement by that date. And December 1st, these two zones will officially be live. Okay, that is the entirety of what I had put together. However, I do want to try to answer as many questions as I can. So let me go to this question box. Okay. If we have a contract in place with an approved vendor, do we need to modify the contract when the CWZ is implemented? Yes. So all CWZ agreements must be effective after an implementation start date for that respective zone. So once a transition period starts for this respective agreement, that agreement will need to update and be executed after the implementation start date. Okay, the next question, how can we receive a list of companies approved for our zone? This you can absolutely find on actioncarding.com. We will also be sharing this presentation over to you folks, so you will have access to that map and you'll be able to see. However, if you go to the Department of Sanitation's website as well, they have a list of authorized awardees and you can find it there as well. Okay. The next question, in a multi-tenant property, is the landlord or each tenant responsible for signing a contract? Is there any benefit in terms of pricing for the landlord to contract on behalf of multiple tenants and then bill back to them? Yes, so in a multi-tenant property, again, property management or buildings are able to enter into agreements on behalf of those respective tenants. You can do it either way. That said, when you negotiate rates with your awardee, that's when they will be able to tell you about any benefits on one or the other. However, when it comes to structure for the respective agreement itself, you can do one agreement that lists out the respective tenants within that respective building, or you can have individual agreements. It goes based off of the building. Okay. The next question here, so will the haulers not awarded city contracts be bought up or given a buyout by the city? So the city will not be, they will not be buying these respective companies. There won't be a buyout. However, M&A activity has definitely become more alive in the past few months, I would say. It's not a requirement by any stretch, and any company that is not an awardee has full discretion on what they choose for their next steps. So whether or not they choose to pursue sale of their respective company and assets, that is something that is up to them. However, I will say, just in terms of the status of this industry, that is an option that folks are looking at right now. Okay, and then I think there's one more question here. So how do we find out when our zone will be implemented? If you are in Bronx East or Bronx West, the date that it will start is October 1st, and you will have to enter into an agreement by November 30th. However, the Department of Sanitation has the authority to promulgate rules for the rollout of all zones. So there will likely be another city council hearing in which they prescribe the time frame when zones will roll out. However, at this point, what we do know is the sequence of the zone transition. So we don't have specific dates. That said, Action and likely all awardees will be distributing that information as soon as it's made available by the Department of Sanitation. Okay, and then I think there's so the next question, is it correct to assume that general contractors / construction managers need to negotiate with approved CWZ approved providers for removal of demo, etc.? What about secured shred services? Are they impacted? This is a great question, and I'm glad you brought it up. So again, the exemption from CWZ requirements does not go based off of the type of service that is being provided. However, it does go based off of the type of material that is being disposed. So within these two examples, and you'll get the full list when Tiara shares out this deck after the fact. However, construction and demolition debris and paper shredding that is meant for destruction or disposal, both of those respective material types are actually excluded from the CWZ program and are still regulated by the Business Integrity Commission. So as much as if this is a service that is provided by a respective awardee, you can negotiate rates and enter into an agreement with an awardee these respective material types are excluded from the CWZ program. Okay. The next question, is there a standard CWZ agreement in place? Is the language negotiable? We have a specific contract language that we would love to incorporate. Yes, so every single awardee is required to submit into the Department of Sanitation a standard form agreement that we plan to use. So every single awardee will have a different version of their respective agreement. However, all of them must be approved by the Department of Sanitation in advance. That said, the language within those respective agreements are negotiable as long as they are mutually agreeable with the customer and the respective awardee. So this is a great question because some customers may have their own contracts that they would prefer that an awardee sign. If there's a longer procurement cycle or this is just how businesses have operated previously, that is still an option. However, there are certain steps that we have to take. So there's specific language that the DSNY has provided to awardees that needs to be incorporated into those contracts. And then we also, similar to when we document which agreements are entered with a property management company, we also have to document and keep record of all agreements that differ from our standard form contract. So that's a great question. Okay. I believe that's all the questions. Tiara, I don't know if you see any more in here.
No, I think that's everything. We can just wait one more minute if there are any outstanding questions. If not, if something comes up
Great.
later on, you can always reach out to myself or Brian with additional questions. As Brian mentioned, I'll be sharing a recording of this session along with some resources for you guys to review.
Yeah, and just to wrap things up on my end, we are always trying to make these informational sessions a little bit more relevant and useful for prospective attendees. So I have 5 questions. If you don't mind, anonymously, just provide some feedback. That'd be super helpful. We're always looking to improve and make these as useful as possible. So if you don't mind scanning that QR code and just leave some feedback, that'd be great. And then, of course, to Tiara's point, wherever you have questions about the CWZ program, your specific business, you're welcome to reach out. My email is here. You're also welcome to request information through our website. The DSNY has a plethora of resources on their website. But if you're looking for information or just don't know the next steps to take, we are happy to help you with finding whatever information it is that you need.
Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
Okay.
Are we good, Tiara? Or do you want to hold on? It's up to you. I'll follow your lead.
Good.
We're good?